Hey guys, it's your girl Dominique, and in this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to make this granny swag jacket. This jacket is so much fun to make. It is made almost entirely of granny squares. Who doesn't love making a granny square, right? They're just so meditative. We're gonna get to play with a lot of color in this jacket. And then there's also a really cool kind of geometric surface crochet moment toward the end of making it that is really fun, and I'm really excited to share that with you guys. All right, y'all, we're gonna talk about sizing. So this is how you size this pattern. So you're going to want 3 granny squares to fit across the widest part of your back. And I like to have it a little bit slouchy, a little bit oversized, so I made sure that the 3 granny squares that I chose were going to be like kind of slouchy on me. My granny squares were 5 rounds. We'll get into that. And then there's going to be 1 more connecting round for each granny square. So you're going to want to factor that into your size as well. So make a little swatch. It doesn't really matter what your gauge is. I know I hate saying that, but it doesn't. Whatever you want your gauge to be is totally fine, just as long as you like the size of the squares. I'm using an acrylic yarn right here, so it's about a worsted weight and they're coming out pretty big. So of course, the bigger the stitch, the faster you're gonna get through this project, and the smaller, the longer. So choose your own adventure. Good luck. Of course, we're gonna need a few things, some yarn, some hooks, so let's get into it. All right, y'all. As I said, this is a stash busting project. That means you get to pick out all of the little balls and all of the random little odds and ends that you have in your stash and bring them all together and see what you got and use a bunch of your stuff. And you can kind of, pick your color palette, really get creative. For this color palette, as you can see, I chose a lot of camo, and then I chose a lot of this really bright orange. Don't ask me why. I'm totally obsessed with that combination, but I have to say I'm really excited about how these colors came out together. You're going to want to pick 2 main colors. You want a color that's going to be the center and the outer ring of each of your granny squares. That means you're gonna need a good amount of that yarn. I used about 3 of these skeins. And then you're going to want a secondary color. Here it's the orange, where you kind of work it throughout the pattern as much as you want, but then across the top of the entire jacket, you're gonna wanna go over it with this color. So pick your 2 colors. I really recommend having colors that are very contrasty. That way it creates a lot of depth in the jacket. As you can see from my original Granny Swag jacket, I chose a very, very bright pink to be the center and the outer ring. And then I chose a really dark green to go over the whole thing, and that created a lot of really cool dimension in the project. So, explore your kit, see what you have, and pick a color palette that excites you and inspires you. We are also going to need a pair of scissors, of course, and a tapestry needle. You're gonna use this to weave in all of your ends. I am so sorry in advance about the ends, but if you do them as you go, I promise it's better, and I promise it's worth it, and I love you guys, I'm sorry. Another little hack that I like to have a little mason jar so that I can put all of my ends. 1, so that my ends don't get all over the house, but 2, it's kind of fun to see all of the colors kind of come together in the mason jar. So these are my tools. Let's get started. All right, everybody, to start off our granny squares, I am going to start with my camo yarn. This is the yarn that I'm going to be using at the beginning and the end of all of my granny squares. To begin with, we are going to start with a simple slip knot, and then I am going to begin the first round. I'm going to chain 1, 2, 3, 4 chains, and then slip stitch back into the beginning of the first chain to make it into a round. We're going to continue working into the round. I'm going to chain 3. This does count as a double crochet, and then I'm going to double crochet 2 into the round. As you're working this round, make sure to keep that end tucked in so that you have 1 less thing to snip at the end of each granny square. So we're making clusters of 3, and then we're going to chain 3. This is going to make our corners, and then we're going to make another cluster of 3 double crochet into the center of this round. Keep that end nice and tucked in. Got my 3 double crochet, and then chain 3 again. Make another cluster of 3 double crochet into the round. Chain 3, and then we're going to make our final cluster of 3 double crochet into our round. you should have 4 clusters of 3 double crochet with chain 3 in the corners of each. Slip stitch into that 3rd chain to complete the round. And then I'm going to cut my ends and leave a good amount of room so that we have some length to work with when we go to sew them in. I'm going to get my 2nd color. I'm going with this nice bright yellow. And again, we're just going to make the ends nice and long. I'm going to make a simple knot toward the bottom base of the square. Tight, nice and tight. And I'm going to continue on the 2nd round. Chain 3, this does count as a double crochet, and then make 2 double crochet into this 1st chain space. We're going to be creating the corners in each of these pieces. We need 1 cluster of 3 double crochet, chain 3, and then another cluster of 3 double crochet into that same chain space to make the corner. So each of your little corners should have a little point on them because of the chain. Make sure to keep your ends nice and organized. In the next chain space, we're going to do 1, 2, 3 double crochet into the chain space, chain 3, and then make another cluster of 3 double crochet into that same chain space. And you can see our square really starting to form here with these little corners. Skip to the next chain space and make a cluster of 3 double crochet, chain 3, and then make a 2nd cluster of 3 double crochet into the same chain space. I'm going to skip over to the next chain space. Same thing one more time. 3 double crochet to begin with, and then make a chain 3 and 3 double crochet into the same chain space to complete the corner. I'm going to slip stitch into the 3rd chain to complete the round. And again, we want to leave the tail nice and long. That way we have a lot of length to work with when we go to sew on these ends. So this is how I like to sew in the ends. I like to take my tapestry needle, put the ends through, and then we're just going to weave them back in through the project. However you like to do this, everybody has their own method. I just like to send it one more time back through the other way to make sure that they are nice and secure. It definitely makes a big difference if you can do this along the way. I know it's a pain. Nobody likes to weave in ends, but you will thank me in the end if you keep doing this along the way. I'm going to get my 3rd color now. Working with this nice brown, I'm going to make a knot toward the bottom of the square to make sure that I have these nice long ends to work with. Chain 3, this counts as a double crochet. Then we're going to be working into that gap between the 3 double crochet clusters. I'm going to make 2 double crochet, which will complete our 1st cluster of 3 double crochet. And then I'm going to skip over into the corner and make a cluster of 3 double crochet, and then we're going to chain 3 and make another cluster of 3 double crochet into that same chain. And that's what we're going to continue to do at every single corner. Make 1 cluster of 3 double crochet, chain 3, and then 1 more cluster of 3 double crochet into the same chain space. Then we'll move on to working in between our clusters of 3 double crochet, and then skip over to the next corner, 3 double crochet into that chain space, chain 3, and 3 double crochet into the same chain to complete the corner. Skip over in between the next 2 clusters of 3 double crochet and work, you guessed it, 3 double crochet into that space. We're going to skip over, make a 1st cluster of 3 double crochet into the corner. Chain 2 and 3 double crochet into the next half of that corner. Skip into the space between the clusters of 3 double crochet and work 3 double crochet into that space. skip over to the final corner, 3 double crochet into the chain space, chain 3, and 3 double crochet into the same chain space to complete the corner. For my next color, I will be using this bright funky green. I'm going to tie a knot close to the base of my square and then chain 3. And then I'm going to work 2 more double crochet into the middle of this cluster right here. And then I'll skip over into the corner and make another cluster of 3 double crochet into the chain space. Chain 3, and make 1 more cluster of 3 double crochet into the same chain space. Then I'm going to skip over in between my next 2 clusters of 3 double crochet and work 3 double crochet into that space between them. And then we'll do that 1 more time now that our granny squares are getting bigger. And then we're back at the corner where we will do 1 cluster of 3 double crochet, and then chain 3, and 1 more cluster of 3 double crochet into the chain space to make that corner. We're going to keep working along the edge in between the other clusters of 3 double crochet and just keep making clusters of 3 double crochet. One great thing about granny squares is you kind of get into this pattern of making 3 of everything, and then of course you'll be able to feel once you've reached a corner and you can make your little corner. I usually don't even have to look when I'm making granny squares just because the repetitive motions are so meditative and I'm able to zone out and not even have to look at my hands. I think you guys are getting the gist of how to make granny squares now, so why don't we fast forward into our final round. For your first granny square, this is the only square where you will be able to make your final round without any connection rounds. So go ahead and make your granny square as big as you like, put your final color on it, and then we're going to be making our next granny squares and connecting them together as we go. All right, here we have our next square ready for its final round and our first connecting round with our previous granny square. I'm going to crochet up to the corner, and then I'm going to start connecting the corner with the previous granny square and connect them along that row to make the connection rounds. Let's go ahead and attach our final round of color. I'm going with my camo color again. Going to chain 3. This counts as a double crochet. And then make 2 double crochet in that space between the clusters below. Skip over to the space between the next 2 clusters and make a cluster of 3 double crochet. And here we are at the corner. To make the corner, we are going to make a cluster of 3 double crochet. Surprise, surprise. And then here's where we're going to start making our connection round with the previous square. We're going to single crochet in the chain space in the corner of the previous square, and then finish up the corner on our working square with the second cluster of 3 double crochet in the chain space. When you're done with that cluster, you're going to single crochet in the gap between the next 2 clusters on the previous square. And then we're going to go back into our working square and make a cluster of 3 double crochet into our working square. Then we will go back into our previous square and single crochet between the gap of the next 2 clusters. So this is how we're going to make these connections. We're going to keep going back and forth from our working square and then our previous square and making single crochets into the gaps in the previous square. We're going to continue working along this row, connecting back and forth with our previous square and our working square. Make clusters of 3 double crochet into your working square. and then single crochet into the next gap between the clusters on your previous square. 3 double crochet in your working square, and single crochet into the gap between the 2 clusters on your previous square. 3 double crochet in the corner, and then single crochet in the chain space of the corner of the previous square. We're going to finish this corner and continue working along this round. Make 3 double crochet to complete your corner. And then 3 double crochet into the gap between the clusters on your previous row. Continue around the entire square, and I will see you when you are done. I have prepared my next square. This is the final square in this row of the first row of the back. I am going to be crocheting the connecting round and single crocheting into the chain 2 space of my previous square to make that first connection. Then I'll finish my corner with 3 double crochet, and then I will single crochet back into my first square in between the gap of the next 2 clusters. And then I will make my next cluster of 3 double crochet on my working square. And single crochet into my previous square. 3 double crochet into the working square. And single crochet into the previous square. I'm just going to continue this until the end of the row, and then when you get to the corner, you will just continue making your granny square as normal all the way around the next square. All right, here we have the first completed row of the back of the jacket. Let's try this baby on and see how we like the fit. I am loving that it's a few inches longer than the length of my shoulders. That's going to give me that slouchy feel that I wanted. All right, it is time to add our second row, so I'm going to show you how to do that right now. All right, so I am prepping our next square by crocheting all the way to the corner, and I'm going to start attaching it to the previous row by single crocheting into the corner of the previous row, and then I'm going to finish off the corner of our working square with 3 double crochet into the same chain space, and then you'll single crochet in between the next gaps on the previous square, and then do 3 double crochet into the working square. You will single crochet back into the previous square, and then 3 double crochet into the working square. We're going to continue this pattern until we get to the end of the row. Once you get to the second corner, we are going to continue with our working square by going all the way around the square like normal. We are going to make 3 double crochets into that same chain space to finish off this corner, and then continue down the rows until this last round is finished. Preparing our next square, we are going to be working around this working square to attach to these 2 sides of the previous squares. Working counterclockwise, we are going to begin with the first square in our second row by single crocheting into the chain 2 space of the corner of the previous square. Then we are going to finish the corner of our working square with 3 double crochets in that same chain 3 space. And then we will single crochet into the next gap on the previous square, and then make 3 double crochets into the next gap of our working square. Single crochet into the gap of the previous square, and 3 double crochet into the next gap of our working square. We are going to continue this way until we get to the next corner, and then I will show you how to begin working on the next edge. All right, we have arrived at the corner, and I am going to be single crocheting into the chain 3 space of the caddy corner square in the first row to really lock in that stitch. And then make 3 double crochet into the chain 3 space of our working square. Now we will continue working along the edge of the first row. We are going to single crochet into the next gap of the previous square, and then make 3 double crochet into the next gap of our working square. Continue until you reach the next corner, and then we are going to finish off our working square by making 3 double crochet in the chain 3 space of our corner to finish off our corner. And then we will continue to work the square like normal, making 3 double crochet between each gap. Alright, I'm going to prepare my third square for the second row. I'm going to attach my yarn, and then I'm going to begin connecting it counterclockwise by connecting it to the first corner of the second square in our second row. And then of course I'm going to finish the corner and continue working up the square until I reach our second corner, where I'm going to crochet into the square caddy corner to this square on the first row just to really lock in that stitch. And then we will continue working along the top edge, connecting it to the previous square. Of course, when we reach that third corner, we are going to finish crocheting all the way around the square as normal and snip the ends when we are done. Continue making rows in this fashion until the back of the jacket is as long as you want it to be. Let's try it on. I absolutely love the length of my jacket. It's nice and long. Now it's time to make the front panels. For our front panels, we are going to count the amount of rows that we did for the back of our jacket, and then we are going to connect 2 long panels of squares with the same amount of rows. I had 6 rows in the back of my jacket, so I will connect 6 squares in 1 long panel on either side of the edges of the back of my jacket. We will connect 1 square at a time in 1 long panel to the bottom of the previous square. I have prepared my first square by crocheting to the first corner, and now I'm going to connect it into that outer corner of our previous square, and then finish off this corner of our working square with 3 double crochet. And then we are going to continue to work along this edge as usual, going back and forth from our previous to our working squares. Connect it until you reach your second corner. When you are done with the connection row, you can continue to crochet around your working square as normal. To connect your next square in the panel, you are going to crochet to the first corner of your working square, and then single crochet into the chain space in the corner of your previous square. And then we are going to connect that entire row until you get to your second corner, and then of course finish crocheting around the square as normal. Continue connecting your squares in a straight line until you have the same amount of squares as you have rows in the back of your jacket. Once you are finished with this side, do the same thing on the other side of the outer edge of the back of the jacket. Let's try it on! Alright, so we have both sides of our cardigan in the front finished, and now we're going to be connecting the front panels to the back panels. We're going to fill the gaps between the front and the back panels all the way up into the last 2 granny squares. We're going to leave those open for the arm. So you'll have 1 less granny square in this row than you've had for the front and back panels. To fill in the gaps for the underarm, we are going to align the back of the jacket to the front panel, being careful not to twist. Once they're laid out, you are going to get your next granny square prepared by crocheting to the end of the square. And then we are going to connect the first corner into the bottom corner of the last granny square in our front panel and begin working up the panel toward the next corner. Then we are going to crochet across the open top edge of our working granny square. Once we reach our next corner, we will align it with the top corner of the bottom row of the back of our jacket and begin working along these open edges of our working granny square and along the back of the jacket. Once we reach our bottom corner, we will go ahead and finish that open edge on the bottom row of our working granny square to complete the round. Now it's time to add in the second square along our underarm panel, and we are going to connect it on these 3 sides to the previous squares in our jacket, leaving the top row open. Crochet to your first corner and then align it to the back of the jacket. Single crochet into the corner between the two squares along the back of the jacket. And then of course we will finish our corner with 3 double crochet in the chain 2 space. And then we will continue working along that edge, connecting our working square to the back of our jacket until we reach that first corner. Then we will align the bottom of our working square along the top row of our previous square, going back and forth between the working granny square and the previous square until we reach the next corner. Once you reach the next corner, you are going to connect that final third side of the working square to the jacket by going back and forth, making clusters of 3 double crochet into our working square and single crocheting between the gaps of the clusters on the previous square. When you get to the corner of our working square, we're going to go ahead and just finish off that edge. Go ahead and cut your yarn, fasten off, and then we will be ready for the next square in our underarm section, which we will be connecting in the same fashion on the 3 sides connecting to the jacket, leaving the top edge open. Continue to join your granny squares in this fashion until you have all 5 granny squares in a row, leaving the top 2 granny squares and the granny square underneath your armpit free to make the sleeves in a round. We are going to be making rows of 3 for the sleeves all the way down until they are long enough. Okay, let's get started. I have prepared my first square by crocheting to the corner, and now I'm going to be connecting it to the first square of the round of 3 for my sleeve. I'm going to single crochet into that gap between the first 2 squares, and then finish off my corner on my working square with 3 double crochet in the chain 3 space. And then of course we're going to single crochet back into our previous square and then make 3 double crochet into our working square. Continue working along this edge until you reach the next corner, and then we are going to finish off this granny square working around just like normal until the round is done. Now it is time to add our second square to the round of our sleeve. I have crocheted to the corner, and I'm going to be aligning the corner of my working square with the corner of the previous square, and then I will be attaching it all the way down that row and then to the square connected to the jacket. Align the corners of the previous square and your working square, and then go ahead and finish off that corner by adding 3 double crochet into the chain space. Single crochet back into your previous square, and then do 3 double crochet into the next gap of your working square. Continue along this path until you reach the next corner. Single crochet into the catty corner square so that you really lock in that stitch, and then we're going to be continuing to work down the next edge. I'm going to finish off this corner with 3 double crochet into the chain 3 space. And then I'm going to single crochet into the next gap on the square that is connected to the jacket. And then of course, I'm going to continue along with my working square by adding 3 double crochet into the next gap. And you know the drill. I will see you at the next corner. Now that we have reached our next corner, we are going to just go ahead and finish up these undone ends of our working square. When we are done with that, we are going to be able to add our third and final square to the round of our sleeve. I'm going to be working counterclockwise and connect it to these 3 sides of the open squares. I'm going to align my corner to the bottom corner in the sleeve, and then go ahead and finish the corner in my working square. And then I'll begin working up along this side. I'm going to single crochet into the previous square, and then make 3 double crochet into the next gap of my working square. And of course, we're just going to continue along this fashion until we reach the next corner of our connecting sides. Now that we've reached our next corner, we're going to go ahead and connect that last row to the previous squares and close up this round for the sleeve. I'm going to finish my corner on my working granny square and then single crochet into the gaps of the previous granny square. Moving up along this edge, I am going to make 3 double crochet into the next gap and then single crochet back into the previous granny square all the way up until this last row is completed. and then I will just go through and finish up that top row on our working granny square. Okay, now we have the first round of the sleeve completed. You will be able to see the sleeve forming now. You can put your arm through. Keep creating length in the sleeve by adding granny squares in rounds of 3 attached to the previous round of granny squares in your sleeve. When you're done with your sleeves, you can try it on, and then you're going to take your chosen color. I chose bright orange, and I'm going to be using this color to surface crochet in a diagonal fashion across the entire jacket until the entire jacket is covered in diagonal lines from front to back. This is going to cause a really cool geometric and contrasting effect. Let's get into it. To start my surface crochet, I'm going to connect my bright orange yarn into the bottom corner of the back of my jacket, and then I'm going to begin crocheting along the diagonal on the surface of the project. Going to chain 3 and then single crochet in between the gaps of the previous row, right in the center of the corner. Chain 3 and then single crochet into the next row between the gaps of the corners. Chain 3, single crochet into the next corner. Chain 3, single crochet into the gaps of the next corner. We're going to continue working this way across the entire granny square. Once you reach the corners of the granny squares, you are simply going to single crochet into the center of all 4 corners. Keep working up the square diagonally all the way up. Just keep following the path. When you reach the armpit, we're just going to be very careful to keep following the diagonal all the way across the squares. You're going to keep working with this diagonal until you reach the very bottom of the sleeve. When you reach the edge of the sleeve, we're simply going to single crochet in between the gaps of the 2 granny squares and then flip our project, and we are going to continue working back down the diagonal of the sleeve. Chain 3, single crochet in between the 2 gaps of the corner. Chain 3, single crochet in between the gaps of the corner of the next row. Chain 3, single crochet into the gaps of the corners of the next row. Continue working downward in a diagonal all the way until you reach another edge of the jacket. Eventually, your lines are going to start to intersect with one another. You're going to create an X at the center of your lines by simply crocheting into the middle of that row below. Keep continuing to work along the diagonals on the squares, chain 3, and then single crochet into the gaps of each of the corners. Continue following the paths of the diagonals, and when you get to the edges of the jacket, just keep going back down the other way into the diagonals of the squares. Eventually, this path is going to lead you all the way around the jacket until your jacket starts to look like this. Eventually, we are going to run into this funky little intersection at the armpit with 5 rows of surface crochet intersecting. When that happens, we're just going to start working an unworked edge at the edge of the jacket. I am going to start back at the bottom row on the opposite side of the jacket and just see where that journey takes me. Keep working your surface crochet rows until the entire jacket is covered front to back in these little lattice X's. When you are done with your surface crochet, your jacket's gonna look something like this. I am absolutely loving this color dimension. All of the colors are popping. Now all that is left to do is to do the border rounds on the edges of the inside and of the sleeves of my jacket. I'm just going to use the same bright orange just to really tie everything in and make everything look nice and polished. To make my border round, I'm going to attach my yarn into the corner of my jacket and work 3 double crochet into the corner, chain 3, and work 3 double crochet into the corner to complete the corner of my working row. I'm going to continue to work around the entire jacket, making clusters of 3 double crochet in each of the gaps. Just like normal, keep it going all the way around. You're going to do this across the entire edge of the jacket, and then of course you're going to want to do on both sleeves as well. It's going to just make everything look nice and polished and tie in that nice surface crochet at the edges. All right, now your jackets should be done. Make sure to weave in all of your little ends. I'm so sorry about those, but come on, this is totally worth it. I absolutely love this outfit. I'm going to be wearing this until future notice. All right, y'all, I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that you had fun making this jacket. Of course, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, or you can always email me if you need to get a hold of me. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and let me know if you learned anything new. I'll be back soon with more crochet fashion, but until then, peace out.